So I are today to talk about savings, creativity, inclusivity, and sustainability, advocating for accelerated adoption of remote integration models. First, what is REMI? REMI is an acronym for remote integration. It's a very odd acronym. We didn't come up with the acronym. How about now? Remote integration. You'll hear it called a bunch of different things around the world, depending on what company you're talking to, what part of the world you're talking to. But for the most part, when we talk about REMI, people know what we're talking about. So REMI has potential for vast enhancements across these four areas. Today, we're here to discuss the potential of all of the advantages, encourage accelerated adoption for these workflows, especially in the United States. The United States is the largest market in the world for live content, and ironically, the slowest to adapt REMI workflows. And if you've not heard of REMI before, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, but we're here more to talk about why it's important and what it is or how to do it. And that we're at a very, very crucial moment as we're starting this transition. It's important to have the right conversations now, holistic conversations about all four of these. And that's the main driver for why we're here now today. Melissa.
So we know that financial drivers are going to be the primary reason that large corporations adopt remote or distributed workflows in production. That's just how that industry, that's how any industry works. That's a business model. What we'd like to propose to you today, however, is that those financial savings, because they are rather inherent to REMI production, you are going to save money if you centralize those workflows. The financial savings are actually what are going to enable us to realize a number of other, arguably more important benefits, and that's going to include improvement of the content, improvement of the workforce's experience, and more sustainable workflows from a climate and planet perspective. But to realize all these benefits, we really have to prioritize them now. If we don't have conversations before this industry adoption is implemented and complete, we know that they're not going to happen, and we're going to struggle years and years down the road to try to retrofit our workflows and our cultures to fit in these things that we all know are important. We have an opportunity now, as things are changing, as transitions are happening, to advocate for these benefits to be included in the roadmaps from the very beginning. It's a really, really special opportunity that we have, and that's what we want to talk to you all about today. So for decades, the production and distribution of live content on a large scale has been reliant on compounds like this, which you'll be familiar with if you've been in the live event world. And they are comprised of dozens of trucks, miles of connectivity infrastructure, armies of production personnel. It's a really huge footprint physically and from a resource standpoint. But with the developments that we've seen in connectivity technology over the last several years, we can reduce this footprint down to a much, much smaller on-site footprint and relocate a lot of these functions that you see in these large compounds into centralized facilities, including existing facilities that just need to be retrofitted with REMI technology. We have a great chance to reduce footprint at this moment. And with that being said, we also do want to acknowledge that this is a large workforce of people who work in these compounds that we're talking about.
Yeah, so as we advocate for more rapid adoption of REMI workflows, especially in the United States, we want to acknowledge thousands of people have spent significant portions of their careers and their lives on the road, bringing us live content. They've sacrificed a lot. They built the industry that we're standing on, and they brought countless numbers of really important moments into our homes and onto our devices. So we want to thank them. So as we continue, we'll share a little bit about, Melissa and I have some deep dive interviews with some industry experts. And we'll also talk about a couple of things that we want to make sure to maintain from the legacy workflows. Why is REMI taking so long? So the technology and the workflows are vetted, and major events have used and are using REMI globally. So what's taking so long? Our friend Tom Sahara, who's SVP of Production Technology at Quintar, shared one of his favorite quotes. Science and technology revolutionize our lives, but memory, tradition, and myth frame our response. Melissa?
So I think what Tom is trying to say here is that this technology, it's in place. It exists now. We're going to talk about some great examples and use cases. What we have to make sure as an industry now is that we don't get bogged down by tradition. There are things that we need to carry over, things we need to maintain, but we have to move forward. And so this is a great read by Tom. So I do want to talk very briefly about the primary driver for adoption of REMI workflows. Of course, that is going to be the money. We're not going to focus heavily on this today, but it's worth mentioning what does drive this change in production workflow. So savings created by REMI are significant and nearly automatic. Obviously, companies are looking for any possible excuse to reduce production costs right now. It's a difficult time in the landscape. Rights for things like sports are incredibly expensive right now. And if done correctly, REMI has the potential to both save money and have a potential future increase in the quality of content. This is not usually a combination of factors that we see together, which is what makes it a really exciting proposition. Two major buckets in which we see savings on the REMI side. One, the cost of compounds versus facilities. So obviously, if you have to build a compound from scratch, or if you have to build a centralized facility from scratch, that is going to require a heavier upfront investment in cost than just renting trucks to populate a compound. But that being said, there's two factors to keep in mind. One, most of these facilities already exist. They're facilities like the Stamford facility in Connecticut and the Warner Brothers Discovery facilities in Atlanta. These facilities just need to be retrofitted. They don't have to be built from scratch. That saves money. Additionally, any investments that you do make in the building out of REMI infrastructure, it's CapEx and not OpEx. And so you can amortize that over many events, over many years. It enables longer-term financial and tax planning. The other components of savings that REMI provides is obviously going to be in travel. This is a huge component of it. And you'll see a couple quotes up here that you can read on your own from folks in the industry that we talked to about the financial impacts of REMI. But dozens to hundreds to thousands of production personnel are traveled to site for each of these live events, depending on the scale. That can be reduced significantly if they only need to be located in centrally located facilities, if they only need to travel to centrally located facilities. And also you can consider the freight and cargo cost reduction if you don't have to ship as much equipment to facilities.
So another bucket, benefits that can be enhanced by REMI, and we did a very deep dive on all these categories, and it fit a 5,000 manuscript into a 30-minute presentation. For the sake of time, we're going to move quickly through these. REMI does unlock enhancements in quality and creative. When in the legacy model, craftspeople, and by craftspeople I mean producers, directors, audio mixers, shaders, they're on compounds, in trucks, no two trucks the same, no two compounds the same. It is an inconsistent environment for these folks. One way that REMI can enhance the quality and the creativity is creating consistency for the craftspeople. A real easy example to look at, unless you want to go, this is the A1 position in 4 different broadcast trucks. Now, granted, the console is the same in all 4 of these, which is not usually the case. We could have gotten a picture with a Labo or something. But just quickly look at the different speaker placement, video monitor placement, the size of the room, the dimensions of the room. All of these are very, very big factors in the way something sounds. So the craftsperson, the mixer, going from truck to truck to truck, has to spend time acclimating to that new truck. That's after they troubleshoot, getting everything working and ready to air. Then they have to actually get used to how the truck sounds. So in a centralized facility, this is, again, the facility in, NBC facility in Stanford. By moving these functions and personnel from remote mobile environments to a fixed facility, you improve predictability and stability. We talked to our friend Carl Malone, coming off the Olympics. The Olympics were a huge success this year. Carl says an advantage for us this summer was having a stable environment at our Stanford facility, a mixed room that we could believe in and acoustics we could rely on. We're not just pushing buttons. We're making a creative mix. We want it to sound good to our ears and be very true to what's making it home. Having a facility where the environment doesn't change is very important, and you can't get that working out of various trucks. We also talked to Emma, and this is a little bit more about the craftspeople part. If it gives them, so Remy gives the mixers more time of reflection, and they can spend those days that they're not traveling coming to her with ideas. So again, ultimately giving the craftspeople time to actually focus on their craft and innovate.
And Emma is the audio leader for F1. So just for context.
Thank you. And then from a critical listening perspective, Emma's talking about how, especially if you're working with Dolby Atmos or immersive audio, you can build a really nice suite in a centralized facility. It's going to be difficult to do that in a truck on the side of a football pitch. And things like immersive audio are very, very important right now. Right now, our live content is sitting right next to blockbuster hits on streaming services. So for the first time, our live content really needs to have things like immersive audio, UHD. The stakes are high at the moment. Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah. So we do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the transition from a legacy production model to a remote production model is not always going to be smooth or easy. There are going to be complicated moments because we're having to build new workflows, update protocols, adapt to industry changes. But that being said, we really are truly seeing some very tangible real world results of how Remy can bring an increased production value. I mean, Carl said to us, he really summed it up beautifully. He said, everything that we've done for the Olympics has just made our lives easier. And more importantly, these were the best sounding games ever. And again, these were games that were heavily utilizing Remy. So that's really the most important thing from a craft perspective. If it sounds better than ever, what better argument?
Okay, personalization and accessibility. This is key to kind of the overarching theme of this session. Remy bolsters personalization, bolsters accessibility, which bolsters inclusivity. We could spend way too long talking about how, but essentially when you are assembling your production on a compound, in trucks on a site, you're limited in how many variations you can output of that content by the resources you have on that site. If you're assembling that show back at a centralized facility, you can harness the power of the facility. You can harness more people. It's easier to get more people there that cost effectively. So for accessibility, your presentation was awesome. We think a lot about video descriptive services. If you think about someone who needs an enhanced audio experience, it's someone who's visually impaired. And the legacy workflows, our hands are tied in how immersive of an experience we can deliver to them. Think about neurodivergence. So various people, everybody in this room, will prefer varying levels of things like dialogue and music and sound effects to emotionally compel them, but also to understand the story and be able to follow the story. And that's not based on our hearing. That's based on how our brains work. Our brains all work very differently. These are good uses of personalization. A very forward-looking use of personalization is multiple narratives and storylines. So Tom Sahara says, we often lock ourselves into one narrative and we don't understand that a very diverse audience is watching. We should deliver these different threads and let them choose what to see. Go ahead. I won't read the whole quote for time. But ultimately, by engaging these audience fragments, you can collect a larger and more diverse audience for your production. This is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. marginalized demographics don't want or necessarily need the same narrative and the same storyline as the mainstream target audience. And what a beautiful opportunity it is to present those marginalized audiences with something that speaks more clearly to them. Okay. Next, human impact on the workforce. So massive benefits for the workforce. We are talking about a massive global workforce, so not everyone's going to feel the same. But through our research and conversations, the vast majority of the people we talk to prefer the predictability, reduced travel, and increased human resources or support that comes along with REMI production. Ultimately, this adds up to an improved quality of life. Another quote from Emma. She's talking about how it supports the flexibility of various people. Again, various people have various preferences, and REMI can ultimately, potentially support those preferences of a workforce. A quote from Jamie Wenner, who's an audio engineer that we interviewed as well. She says, sometimes I feel like I'm stepping in and out of my life at home. More time working near home might just mean taking better care of yourself would be a little easier. I agree. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I take better care of myself when I'm not on the road. It's easier to be healthy and take care of yourself when you're not on the road. Another quote from Jamie. I love going to site and seeing somebody you haven't worked with for 2 years. There's a camaraderie knowing we're all in this together. That's a feeling of community. So this is an example of something we can't lose during this time of transition. As we advocate for REMI, we learned a lot in the pandemic about the loss of a sense of community and culture. When everybody had to go work from home and from different places, we really felt that. So it's going to be incumbent upon leaders to build into cultures a sense of community in REMI environments. That's another reason it's important to have this be part of the conversation early. This kind of thing takes planning. And so we needed to be talking about it now as we're talking about things like savings.
So one very exciting thing that REMI potentially unlocks is more access to an inclusive and accessible talent pipeline. This is a business that revolves around storytelling. It's crucial to have diverse perspectives contributing to the creation of those stories. And REMI offers a path to potentially opening more roles, especially more production roles, to a more diverse pool of talent. There may be people who would be fascinated in and great at production roles that have historically been on site, but who may not be able to be traveling nearly full time. I mean, this may open up opportunities to hire people who maybe are primary caregivers at home for children or parents or whoever, people who maybe have differing physical abilities that make traveling difficult. It opens up really some very interesting opportunities to be able to share these roles with people who previously would not have seen them as clear options for them.
I got a quick question. I'll jump in. Has anybody in this room ever been on a production truck on a compound that has a wheelchair ramp? I haven't. And that's not fair. Okay.
So one other thing I want to consider here is that I think many of us have been able to tell over the past several years particularly that we've maybe not done the best job we can as an industry of educating the next up-and-coming generation of talent, especially a diverse young talent pool, about the roles that are even available to them. They don't know about a lot of these opportunities that might be great career paths for them. And it's also been very difficult historically to showcase a lot of these roles to people widely because they are happening in disparate places at disparate times, and no one's flying students out to site to take a look at, at the roles happening on a compound. And so if you have a centralized facility, you have the potential to be able to showcase these jobs, these roles, these crafts to many more people. Emma talks a little bit about this. She says, centralized facilities give more of an opportunity for visibility. You can show people look, here it is. It's easy for you to come and see it. It's easy for you to get to know what we do. And in her experience, you're more likely to get diverse application. It also opens up paths to potentially partnering with local schools, training programs, hiring organizations, being able to bring people in so they can see more opportunities. Jamie also mentioned something interesting about training. Once you've hired great staff, you do need to train them. And she says people could train in a facility more easily than in a truck. With a truck, you have to figure out, where it will be, when it will open, when you can sit at the desk to not interrupt the broadcast. And the truck could be anywhere in the country. And I think we can all feel that it is true that budgets to send people out on site for training are some of the first things that get cut when budget cuts come. So having those training programs in a centralized facility is a really exciting opportunity. And we've seen some great examples of this happening at F1, at Sky, WBD, NBC, utilizing something that Emma talks about here. She says you can have a second sound room or a second gallery, second production control room, depending on the facility. And next door, you can mimic the show there, and you can have people train there on an actual live broadcast, real time, without impacting the production. It's really exciting. You can't really do that on site that well. You would need a second truck. They don't want you to touch the faders on site. She mentions you can always mimic an exact show somewhere else, and it's an amazing platform to bring people in. And this is a really, really great training tool that centralized facilities open up. Also allows for more considerations of long-term career paths, training programs, career pipelines, and development programs. Now, there are people in the production sphere doing great training work. We've met with many of them, but I would argue that having the production come into a centralized facility potentially opens the opportunity for a more structured and more standardized training program and career pipeline and career trajectory program to potentially be developed in a more sustainable way. As Brian said, harnessing the power of the facility, utilizing the human support staff that are there, management, culture, HR, engineering. You can build a more sustainable program that can be invested in and built over time.
All right, home stretch. Juan, we've made up some time here. We're almost there, everybody. Environmental sustainability is the most critical long-term initiative of our time, because we have nothing without an inhabitable climate. Nothing we've talked about today or this entire week during this summit matters without an inhabitable climate. And we are unfortunately trending towards an uninhabitable climate. And our industry is contributing to that trend through what we now can prove is an unnecessary amount of carbon being dumped into an already carbon-heavy atmosphere. Tens of thousands of people travel annually to produce live content, almost all by airplane. And in the U.S., thousands of production trucks are on the road year-round, going from location to location, emitting carbon. What's the next slide, Melissa? Okay.
Olympics.
So that's depressing, but we do have reason for hope that our industry can contribute to turn this thing around. If you need proof, if you need hope, we can look again to the Summer Olympics. So in 2020, Tokyo Summer Olympics, NBC had about 2,000 people on site in Tokyo, and they had about 1,000 people in Stanford at the facility. This year, Paris 2024, they flipped it. They totally flipped it. This is inspirational. They had 2,000 people in Stanford and 1,000 people in Paris. And for any content creator or executive out there that says their event is too important to leverage Remy, I'm sorry, this was the Summer Olympics, and it was a hit. This gives me hope, and it's not just NBC. companies around the world are making a real difference. We just need to bring the rest of the companies along with us. Melissa?
So every decision that has environmental impact carries amplified weight right now. We know this because of the state of our planet. And targeting carbon neutrality is no longer going to be good enough. We're going to have to start considering a future of carbon negativity or restorative practices. And while we do know that REMI is going to continue to carry a carbon footprint for the foreseeable future, we can all help lead the way in reducing that footprint by helping to advocate for the adoption of these methods. And I did want to share a quote from Ray Anderson. Once we become sustainable, we become restorative by helping others to become sustainable. So Ray Anderson, if you're not familiar with him, is the founder and CEO of Interface, which is a carpet company. I know that's not our gig here, but Interface is really interesting because they were a company whose CEO, Ray, decided at one point to make it a priority for his company to become carbon neutral and eventually carbon negative. And they did it. They actually did it in an industry in which that was not really considered widely to be possible. Interface is now a leader in sustainability in not just manufacturing, but industry worldwide, and a great inspiration to us when we were putting together this paper saying what Ray did to help advocate for sustainability in manufacturing. We see a lot of parallels to our industry, and it's a great opportunity for us all to keep in mind that the decisions that are being made right now have long-term impact, and is a call to action to everybody to try to push your companies and your leaders and the people that you interface with to understand the benefits, the sustainability and environmental benefits. Also, an interesting concept just wanted to bring up briefly is that sustainability goes beyond the environment. I mean, sustainability just means the ability to maintain something over time. And that's what we want for everything, right? It's what we want for all of these benefits. We want our planet and our actions to be sustainable from a climate perspective. We want our budgets to be sustainable so that our companies stay in business. We want our human workforce to be well supported and sustainable. There's just a really beautiful opportunity to unlock sustainability across many factors with one toolkit, one REMI toolkit. It's a rare opportunity, and so that's why we bring this conversation to you today.
And last slide, Dr. Mona Omadeo, she was an advisor to Interface on sustainability. And this quote's awesome. If it has been done, it can be done. It's now the question, the challenge for leaders is not can we do it? The question is, are we willing to do it? So first, decide if you are willing to do it. And then once you've made that decision, we implore you to act. What's the putting theory into practice? There you go. We tied it into the conference. So act on this. Compel executives in your companies to adopt REMI for all of the right reasons. And as you do, you will be challenged. And when you're challenged, innovate. This group above any other should be able to nobly innovate for the right cause. That's all we have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brian. Melissa, do we have any questions? There's one right over here.
Paul Trelawney, IBM. Are you advocating total REMI, i.e. pan, tilt, zoom on the camera? Is that all done remotely?
I think that for the foreseeable future, there will be a need for personnel on site. Not forever, but for the foreseeable future. So first, we are advocating for more rapid and wider adoption of REMI workflows. Some of those full REMI, or not full REMI, but kind of a hybrid. But for the foreseeable future, we're going to need some humans on site to deploy microphones and cameras and things like that. full implementation is a wonderful goal. I think it's a ways off.
There are also some interesting kind of hybrid implementations happening right now. We've talked to both F1 and NBC about some models that they have in place where people are not traveling to the site of the event, but people are traveling shorter distances to that facility and then staying there for a week, for several days, and then traveling back to their homes. And that's a sort of in-between step that I think is a really valuable place to get to on the way there, because it does decrease the travel, but it also gives those folks the opportunity to, even if they're traveling, they are staying in a consistent space and for a shorter amount of time. They're not in their own bed, but they're in the same bed for a couple days and then they get to go home. So I think there are tiers that we're going to see through this adoption process.
Yeah, I was impressed in the last year or so that there are some manufacturers advocating that you let AI make the camera track the action on a sports field. You don't have to be there to be a cameraman. The AI can detect what's going on. And so that's a more powerful sort of aspect of Remy.
Absolutely.
I'm at time for one more question. Any more questions? No. Okay. Well, Brian, listen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Juan.
Appreciate that. And thank everybody for attending this session.